"I'll give you $5,000 if you speak Russian," the Mafia boss said, sliding the cash across the table. He expected fear, maybe embarrassment. What he did not expect was the waitress leaning closer and correcting his grammar in front of the most dangerous men in Philadelphia. Outside, snow buried the city in silence. Inside the restaurant, Hannah Collins could feel an unpaid hospital bill folded inside her uniform pocket, and the weight of her mother's life pressing against every breath. She needed the money, but some offers do not buy your time. They buy the first piece of your freedom. This is not only a story about forbidden attraction, it is about power, desperation, control, and the moment love becomes impossible to separate from danger. Watch until the end, because one sentence in Russian will change every life in that room, like the video and comment where you are watching from. But before Hannah Collins stood beneath the darkest chandelier in Philadelphia and corrected a crime boss in flawless Russian, there had been 3 ordinary days. 3 days of crowded trains, cold coffee, fluorescent hospital corridors, and numbers that refused to become smaller no matter how many times she added them. On Monday afternoon, Hannah sat near the back of a graduate seminar at the University of Pennsylvania with a notebook open and her phone hidden beneath the table. Snow pressed softly against the tall windows. A radiator clicked in the corner like an impatient metronome. At the front of the room, Dr. Samuel Carter wrote one sentence on the board. A translator must preserve the original meaning. He turned toward the class. True or false? Hannah looked at the sentence on the board. Her phone vibrated once against her palm. She did not need to read the screen to know who was calling. Samuel noticed her distraction but continued. Imagine a doctor says a treatment is aggressive. The interpreter uses a word that means violent. Has the message been translated accurately? No, someone said. The dictionary might disagree. A few students smiled. Samuel looked toward Hannah. Miss Collins. She lifted her eyes. Neutrality is often what people call a choice they do not want responsibility for. The smile vanished from Samuel's face, replaced by interest. What does the translator owe the listener? The truth, Hannah said. And what does the translator owe the speaker? The same thing. Even when those truths are not identical. Hannah glanced down at her phone. 6 missed calls from Jefferson Oncology. She closed her notebook. Then the translator has to decide which kind of dishonesty does less damage. Samuel studied her for another second, as though the answer had revealed more than she intended. After class, Samuel stopped her near the door. You missed our meeting Friday. My mother had an appointment. How is she still making jokes about hospital food? Take the week. I cannot afford to. I meant academically. So did I. Hannah left the building and stepped into the gray afternoon. Philadelphia had gone colorless beneath the winter sky. Cars hissed through wet streets. Students hurried past her beneath umbrellas, their faces buried in scarves. She walked toward the hospital instead of the train station, counting the $412 in her checking account against rent food and a treatment that could not wait for her to become less poor. Jefferson Oncology smelled like disinfectant, burnt coffee, and overheated air. Hannah found Judith seated beside a narrow window with a knitted blanket across her knees. Judith Collins had spent 30 years as a public school librarian. Even now, thin from treatment and wearing a blue scarf over her hair, one raised eyebrow could still silence a room. You are late, Judith said. You told me 4. I told you 3:30. You changed it because you knew I had class. I improved it. Hannah sat beside her. That is not how time works. It is how motherhood works. Judith smiled, but the smile faltered when a nurse approached with a folder. The nurse sat across from them. There is a problem with the insurance authorization. Hannah felt her shoulders tighten. What kind of problem? The new treatment requires an additional deposit before the next infusion. We submitted an appeal, but it may take several weeks. How much? The nurse hesitated, then turned the folder so Hannah could see. $4,780. The number looked unreal, printed in clean black ink. Judith barely glanced at it. We can delay one treatment. The nurse's silence answered before Hannah could. How long can we delay? Hannah asked. I would need the physician to discuss the medical risk. That means not long. It means the schedule was designed for a reason. Judith placed one hand over Hannah's wrist. We will figure something out. Hannah stared at the amount. When is it due? Friday morning. The nurse left them with the folder. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall. Judith folded the blanket more tightly around herself. I have survived budget meetings, school boards, and your grandmother's opinions. I can survive one delayed appointment. Grandma's opinions were more dangerous than cancer. Exactly. Hannah tried to smile. Judith watched her. Do not borrow from anyone dangerous. Hannah looked up. I do not know anyone dangerous. Everyone knows someone dangerous. Most people just call them family employers or elected officials. Comforting, I'm serious. So am I. Judith squeezed her hand. I would rather miss a treatment than watch you ruin your life trying to buy me another one. Hannah looked toward the closed door. You do not get to decide that alone. Neither do you. The argument ended when another nurse entered to check Judith's blood pressure. Her grandmother Rose had taught her Russian before she taught her how to ride a bicycle. Rose had been born in Brighton Beach and raised by parents who had carried their language across an ocean in 2 suitcases. In her apartment, English was for landlords, doctors, and official forms. Russian was for family anger, tenderness, and stories told after midnight. Rose made her ask for cookies in complete Russian sentences, read Pushkin aloud until every consonant sounded clean, and listen for the way a pause could change the meaning of an entire confession. At college, she studied Slavic literature. Later, she trained as a medical interpreter, where the difference between discomfort and pain could change a diagnosis, and the difference between probably and certainly could change a family. Language had always been the one thing Hannah possessed that no bill could take from her. Until now, it had never been worth $4,780 by Friday. That night, she worked the closing shift at the Laurel Room. The restaurant stood near Rittenhouse Square behind brass doors and dark windows. It served steaks, old whiskey, and the illusion that every private conversation remained private. Frank Walsh, the manager, had hired Hannah 2 years earlier because she could carry 6 plates without dropping one, and because Judith had once helped his son apply to college. Frank found her in the service hall pouring bourbon into a water glass. He took it from her. How much do you need? Almost $5,000. For Judith, she nodded. I can advance you $300. It is what you have, Hannah said softly. Keep it. I can find another waitress. Judith cannot find another daughter. Hannah touched his arm and returned to the dining room. By Thursday evening, Hannah had called the hospital 2 charities, 3 banks, an old employer, and a broke cousin in New Jersey. She sold Rose's gold bracelet for $600 and cried in the pawnshop bathroom afterward. She still needed more than $4,000. Then Dominic Kane entered the Laurel Room. By the time Hannah heard the first sentence of Russian from Table 12, desperation had already stripped away the part of her that would normally lower her eyes. The men expected a waitress. Dominic expected a game. Hannah saw $100 bills beneath a whiskey glass and heard the oncology nurse saying Friday morning. So she answered him. Not cautiously, not politely, perfectly. The challenge lasted nearly an hour. Dominic shifted from formal Russian to dock workers' slang. He quoted Dostoevsky. She corrected him. One associate began an old Soviet proverb and she finished it. The men stopped laughing. Dominic did not. His attention settled on her with unnerving precision. Where did you learn? He asked in Russian. My grandmother. From Moscow, Brooklyn. That drew another quiet laugh from him. He lifted his glass. Brooklyn has produced more convincing Russians than Moscow. Brooklyn has better rent control. One of the men beside him choked on his drink. Travis Shaw did not laugh. He sat to Dominic's right, broad-shouldered and still with the hard expression of a man who considered amusement a security failure. When Hannah turned to refill his glass, Travis covered it with his hand. We are finished. Dominic continued looking at her. No, he said. We are not. He asked Hannah to translate a sentence one of the men whispered near the window. She gave him the literal meaning first, then she added, but that is not what he intends. The man's face changed. Dominic's did not. What does he intend? He is saying the shipment was delayed. The verb he used suggests someone chose the delay. The man protested in Russian. Hannah answered him in the same language, calm and exact. You used the deliberate form, twice. Dominic turned toward the man. The conversation that followed became quieter. Hannah moved away from the table, but she felt Dominic's attention follow her through the room. At closing, Dominic pushed the cash toward her and placed a black business card on top. Kane Freight, tomorrow, noon. I have class. After class, I did not say yes, no. But you are still standing here. Frank watched from the bar as Hannah picked up the money. What do you need it for? Dominic asked. That was not part of the challenge. His gaze sharpened, but he did not press her. Dominic rose. He was taller than Hannah had realized. Up close, there was nothing theatrical about him. No gold chain, no raised voice, no obvious need to prove that he was dangerous. That made him worse. He placed the business card inside her order book. You hear the difference between what people say and what they mean. So do most waitresses. Most waitresses pretend not to. He put on his coat. At the door, he paused. In my business, pretending is expensive. Then he disappeared into the snow. Frank locked the door behind him. You need to give that money back. My mother has treatment tomorrow. Frank looked at the bills in her hands. I can help you find another way. I spent 3 days finding every other way. Hannah, listen to me. Dominic Kane does not make offers because he is generous. He lost a bet. He does not lose bets. He did tonight. Frank shook his head. No. Men like him turn losing into an introduction. Hannah looked through the glass doors. A black sedan waited across the street. Frank lowered his voice. He does not buy people all at once. He buys the emergency, then the next emergency. Eventually, you cannot remember which part of your life still belongs to you. The sentence stayed with Hannah as she called the oncology clinic from the restaurant kitchen. The receptionist confirmed the payment. Judith's treatment would begin at 8 the next morning. Relief moved through Hannah so quickly it almost hurt. For 1 minute, Dominic Kane was not a warning. He was the reason her mother would receive another chance. That thought frightened her more than the car outside. The next afternoon, Hannah left the hospital and found a black sedan at the curb. The driver handed her an envelope. Inside was the hospital receipt, including the exact time she had called from the restaurant kitchen. How did he get this? I drive the car, ma'am. That was not an answer. Hannah climbed into the back seat. Kane Freight occupied a restored brick building along the Delaware River. From the top floor, the city looked clean and distant. Tugboats moved through dark water. Warehouses stretched toward the docks like sealed boxes. Dominic stood beside the window when Hannah entered. He had removed his jacket and rolled his sleeves once at the wrist. A charcoal drawing lay partly hidden beneath a shipping report. Hannah placed the hospital receipt on his desk. You searched my life. I verified what you needed. You accessed private medical information. I confirmed a payment. You had no right. Dominic looked at her. Rights matter most to people who believe the world respects them. That sounds like something men say after taking them away. A quiet tension entered the room. Travis stood near the door. Dominic gestured toward the chair across from his desk. Hannah remained standing. He opened a folder. Inside were copies of her university record interpretation certification, employment history rental agreement, and Judith's public fundraising page. You speak Russian at a professional level, he said. You understand medical and legal terminology. You study literature, which means you listen for implication. You have no criminal record, no husband, no children, and no current employer who pays enough to keep you loyal. Hannah felt anger rise beneath her skin. You forgot to mention my blood type. Oh, positive. Travis smiled. Hannah did not. Dominic closed the folder. I need a language consultant. For what, shipping negotiations, contracts, overseas partners, legal shipping, some of it. At least you are honest. I'm careful. There is a difference. Yes. He slid a contract across the desk. The salary was more than Hannah earned in 6 months. A second document described a medical grant that would cover Judith's treatment through an independent foundation. Hannah looked up. What happens if I say no, you leave, and my mother? The payment already made remains paid. The future treatment Dominic did not answer. The silence was smooth enough to be mistaken for courtesy. Hannah picked up a pen. Travis shifted near the door. Dominic watched her sign nothing. Instead, she crossed out the first clause, then the second. She wrote in the margins, I translate spoken and written language only. I do not transport packages. I do not sign customs forms. I do not carry weapons. I do not lie to police courts or medical personnel. I leave any room where violence begins. Travis stepped closer. You are not in a position to rewrite Mr. Kane's contract. Hannah kept writing. Then he can find another Russian-speaking graduate student whose mother needs chemotherapy by Friday. Dominic's eyes did not leave her hand. She added one final condition. Medical support for Judith Collins cannot be withdrawn as punishment leverage or retaliation. Dominic read the page. You assume I intend to trap you. I assume you did not become powerful by leaving exits unlocked. For several seconds only, the clock on the wall moved. Then Dominic signed beneath her changes. Travis stared at him. She is not qualified to negotiate with you. Dominic handed Hannah the pen. She just did. Her first assignment began that evening. A private dining room above a closed seafood restaurant waited near the river. 3 Russian-speaking brokers sat beneath a light that made everyone look tired. The conversation began with refrigerated containers, insurance schedules, and inspection delays. Hannah translated sentence after sentence. Then one broker said a shipment needed to pass beneath the eyes of customs. Hannah stopped. Dominic turned toward her. Why did you stop? The broker smiled. An idiom. Hannah looked at Dominic. It is an idiom. It means the cargo is expected to move without inspection. The broker's smile weakened. Dominic leaned back. Translate everything exactly. She did. Within minutes, the conversation exposed a port supervisor who had been selling access to a rival network. Dominic never raised his voice. He only asked questions. Each one made the room colder. When the meeting ended, Hannah saw the supervisor being forced into a waiting vehicle. She turned to Dominic. What happens to him? He answers questions. And after that, that depends on his answers. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are entitled to tonight. The vehicle door slammed. Hannah looked at the empty place where the man had stood. My translation put him in that car. His choices put him there. You needed my words to prove it. Dominic stepped closer, not touching her. You wanted exact truth. I wanted honest business. There is no honest version of power. His voice was quiet. There are only cleaner rooms. At midnight, Hannah returned to her apartment and found Brooke asleep on the couch with a textbook open across her chest. The room smelled like cold noodles and laundry detergent. For a moment, everything looked ordinary. Then Hannah saw the black sedan parked across the street. A man sat behind the wheel watching the building. Brooke opened her eyes. Do you know that car? Hannah stood at the window with Dominic's contract inside her bag and Judith's next treatment marked paid on her phone. No, she said. The lie came easily. That was when Hannah understood the money had not opened a door. The door had closed behind Hannah, but the lock was not made of steel. It was made of hospital receipts, signed contracts, and the quiet knowledge that walking away would cost more than she could pay. The next morning she woke before sunrise to the sound of a car idling below her apartment. The black sedan was still there. Brooke stood in the kitchen wearing Hannah's robe and holding a cup of coffee. You said you did not know them. I do not. That man has been outside all night. Hannah opened the refrigerator, though she was not hungry. Maybe he lives nearby. In the car, he could be going through something. Brooke placed the coffee on the counter. So are you. Hannah closed the refrigerator. Brooke had known her since their first semester of graduate school. She knew when Hannah was avoiding an answer, when she was angry, and when she was pretending not to be afraid. You disappeared after class, Brooke said. Then you came home after midnight in a black car wearing shoes that looked like they walked through a murder. They walked through a seafood restaurant. That is not better. Hannah poured water into a glass. Brooke watched her hands. What did you get involved in translation work? For whom? A shipping company. At midnight, they work with overseas clients. Brooke stared at her. That is the worst lie you have ever told me. No, it is the most incomplete truth. That is still a lie. Hannah wanted to tell her everything. She wanted to place the contract on the table, show her the hospital bills, and admit that a man with quiet eyes had learned the shape of her desperation before she learned his middle name. Instead, she picked up her coat. I have to go. To class. To work. Brooke looked toward the window. The driver stepped out of the sedan and opened the rear door. Brooke's voice softened. Hannah, people do not send cars like that unless they want everyone to know you belong to someone. Hannah paused with her hand on the doorknob. I do not belong to anyone. She said it firmly enough to sound true. The driver introduced himself as Michael. He was in his early 50s, with silver hair and the patient expression of a man who had spent many years pretending not to hear conversations in the back seat. Hannah climbed into the car. "Who told you to stay outside my apartment, Mr. Kane? I want you to stop." Michael glanced at her through the mirror. "You will have to tell him." "I am telling you. I drive the car. That seems to be your answer for everything. It keeps me employed." The city moved past the tinted windows. Philadelphia looked different from inside Dominic's car. The traffic seemed farther away. People crossing the street became part of a silent picture. Even the police paid less attention. At Kane Freight, Hannah was given a temporary office 2 doors from Dominic's. The room contained a desk, a locked filing cabinet, a new laptop, and no personal objects. A folder waited beside the keyboard. Inside were translated contracts, shipping schedules, invoices, and a list of names. Travis stood in the doorway. "Mr. Kane wants these reviewed by noon. There are 200 pages. "Then you should begin." Hannah looked at the folder. "Which documents are urgent?" "All of them. Which documents are connected to today's meetings?" Travis did not answer. She understood. He was not testing her ability to translate. He was testing whether she would complain. Hannah selected the documents written by the same company attending the first meeting and ignored the rest. At 11:40, she carried 6 pages into Dominic's office. Travis was already there. Dominic stood near the window, speaking on the phone. He ended the call when Hannah entered. "You finished? I finished what matters." Travis folded his arms. "I gave you the entire file, and most of it is routine insurance language. These 6 pages are not." She placed them on Dominic's desk. "The Russian version and the English version do not match." Dominic looked down. "How the English contract says the client assumes responsibility after delivery. The Russian version says responsibility transfers when the cargo reaches American waters." "That difference is worth several $1,000,000, Dominic said. "Yes." Travis picked up the pages. "It could be an error. It appears 4 times. Translators make mistakes, not the same mistake in the same direction." Dominic looked at Hannah. "What does that tell you? The client expects something to happen before the cargo reaches the dock. If it is seized, damaged, or removed, they want the loss to belong to you." Travis read the clause again. "You are making assumptions." Hannah met his stare. "I am reading grammar." Dominic pressed a button on his desk phone. "Cancel the agreement." A voice answered through the speaker. "They are already on the way. Then let them arrive." He ended the call. Travis placed the pages down. "You are going to destroy a 10-year relationship because she found a verb." Dominic's gaze turned cold. "No, I am going to destroy it because they believed I would not." The meeting lasted 20 minutes. The Russian executives entered smiling and left without their contract. Hannah sat beside Dominic and translated every denial. The men insisted the difference was accidental. One blamed a junior attorney. Another offered to correct the language immediately. Dominic listened until they stopped speaking. Then he asked Hannah one question. "Do they believe I will accept the explanation?" She studied the men. Their clothing was expensive. Their voices were controlled. The oldest one kept addressing Dominic by his formal title while refusing to meet his eyes. "They respect your position," Hannah said. "They do not respect you." The oldest man looked at her sharply. Dominic leaned back. "Explain." "He keeps using formal language to create distance. He is speaking to the office, not the person. He believes someone else will control the dock soon." No one moved. Dominic turned to the oldest man and changed the subject. "Who promised you that?" The man denied understanding. Dominic repeated the question in Russian. His pronunciation was imperfect, but the meaning was clear. The man's eyes shifted toward Travis for less than a second. Hannah saw it. So did Dominic. Travis stepped forward. "He looked at me because I speak for the company." "No," Hannah said. "He looked at you because Dominic asked who made the promise." The room went still. Travis turned toward her. "You should translate, not speculate." Dominic's voice cut through the tension. "She will do both." The executives left without shaking hands. After the door closed, Dominic dismissed everyone except Hannah. Travis remained near the doorway. Dominic looked at him. "That includes you." Travis left slowly. Hannah waited until the door clicked shut. You already suspected him. I suspect everyone. That is not an answer. It is the only safe one. Dominic moved toward the sideboard and poured 2 glasses of water. He offered one to her. She took it. You did not translate what that man said he told her. I translated what he believed. That is more valuable. It is also more dangerous. For him, for me. Dominic watched her over the rim of his glass. You think understanding people makes you responsible for them. I think helping someone act makes me responsible for part of the result. You did not create the result. No, I just make it easier to reach. He placed the glass down. Is that what your professor teaches? No. He uses safer examples. A faint smile crossed Dominic's face. What does he think translators owe the truth? Which truth exactly? Over the next 6 weeks, Hannah learned the architecture of Dominic's empire. Kane Freight was legitimate on paper. It moved food machinery, furniture, and medical equipment through ports along the East Coast. The trucks were real. The employees were real. The taxes were paid, so were the inspectors. The legal company sat above a second system built from favors, threats, hidden ownership, and cargo that did not always appear on official records. Hannah never saw drugs. Dominic had forbidden them from his roots years earlier, a decision Travis considered sentimental and unprofitable. She did see imported watches with altered serial numbers, undeclared gemstones, cash packed inside machine parts, and luxury vehicles whose ownership records had been rewritten in 3 countries. She translated meetings in hotel suites where curtains remained closed at noon. She sat at restaurant tables where no one touched the food. She listened to businessmen discuss violence through phrases about weather delays and family obligations. A problem could mean a witness. A correction could mean a beating. A permanent solution needed no explanation. Hannah began keeping 2 notebooks. The first contained translations. The second contained questions. How many people had disappeared after one of Dominic's quiet meetings? How many families depended on his money? How many police officers knew which warehouses not to inspect? How many of the men who called him generous had first been taught to fear him? She kept the second notebook hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom. Brooke noticed that Hannah no longer stayed late at the library. She noticed the new clothes Dominic's assistant purchased after saying Hannah's ordinary dresses looked too informal for international meetings. She noticed that Hannah sometimes answered phone calls in Russian and walked into another room. One Friday evening, Brooke stood in Hannah's doorway. We have not eaten dinner together in 3 weeks. I have been working. You are always working. My mother is getting treatment. I know. That treatment costs money. I know that too. Hannah closed her laptop. Brooke leaned against the doorframe. Does your mother know who is paying? Hannah said nothing. That means no. She knows I have a consulting job. She thinks you translate shipping contracts. I do translate shipping contracts. Brooke's expression tightened. You have become very good at saying things that are technically true. Hannah looked away. Brooke sat beside her. I am not asking because I want to judge you. I am asking because every time that car arrives, you look like part of you wants to run toward it and part of you wants to hide. Hannah stared at the street below. The sedan was waiting. I do not know which part is right. Then maybe neither part feels safe. At work, Dominic began asking for Hannah, even when no translation was required. He brought her into negotiations with local contractors, union representatives, and politicians who spoke only English. At first, she assumed he wanted her to observe. Then she realized he wanted her to listen. After meetings, he would ask the same question. What did I miss? Hannah would tell him who was lying, who was frightened, who had rehearsed an answer, and who kept using another person's name to avoid taking responsibility. She was not always correct. When she was wrong, Dominic told her. When she was right, someone usually lost money. One night, after a construction executive left Dominic's office, Hannah said, He is hiding something about the concrete contract. Dominic looked at the closed door. Why he kept saying his company followed every requirement. That sounds reassuring. It would be if you asked whether he followed the requirements. You asked whether the material was safe. Dominic called Travis. Within an hour, they discovered that the company had substituted lower-grade concrete on 3 city projects. Dominic canceled the contract. Hannah expected him to use the information for leverage. Instead, he sent the records anonymously to a city inspector. You could have profited from that, she said. I already own property near one of the buildings. So this is self-interest. Most useful decisions are. You never do anything only because it is right. Dominic looked at her. People who say they do are usually selling something. She should have disliked him more for that answer. Instead, she trusted it. That frightened her. Travis's hostility became less subtle. He began excluding Hannah from meetings, then blaming her for missing information. He gave her incomplete files. He changed schedules without telling her. One afternoon, he cornered her in the corridor outside Dominic's office. Before you arrived, he did not need explanations. Before I arrived, people lied to him in 2 languages. You think being useful makes you safe? No. The answer made him pause. Hannah held his gaze. I think being useful makes people tolerate me until I am inconvenient. Travis stepped closer. Then you understand more than I thought. I understand you want me gone. I want the organization to survive. And I am preventing that you are teaching him to hesitate. Maybe he should. Travis's face hardened. Hesitation gets men killed. So does certainty. His eyes moved toward Dominic's closed office. You think he is different with you. I do not think anything. That is another lie. Hannah started to walk away. Travis caught her wrist. His grip was not hard enough to bruise, but it was meant to stop her. The office door opened. Dominic stood inside. Remove your hand. Travis released her. She needs to understand where she is. Dominic's eyes remained on him. She understands. She is changing how you operate. No, she is changing how much I know. Travis looked between them. That will become the same thing. He walked away. Hannah rubbed her wrist. Dominic noticed. Did he hurt you? No, that was not my question. She looked at him. No. Dominic called security and ordered that Travis no longer assign her schedule. Hannah stepped into his office. I can handle him. I know. Then why interfere? Because he touched you. He grabbed my wrist. That is touching you. The calmness in Dominic's voice was more alarming than anger. Hannah closed the door. You do not get to turn every insult into a death sentence. I did not. You thought about it. Dominic did not deny it. She walked toward his desk and noticed an open sketchbook beneath a shipping report. The drawing showed the Benjamin Franklin Bridge at dawn. The lines were careful and alive. Mist rose above the river. The city looked softer than it ever did in daylight. Hannah lifted the report. Dominic crossed the room and closed the sketchbook. You draw, sometimes. You are good. That is not useful. Not everything has to be. In my world it does. She looked at him. What did you want before this world? He remained silent long enough that she thought he would not answer. Art history. The admission sounded almost foreign in his voice. You wanted to teach, I wanted to paint. What happened, my father? 2 words carried an entire childhood. Dominic opened the sketchbook again. The next page showed a woman seated beside a window with a book in her lap. Her face was unfinished, but the posture held warmth. My mother, he said. Evelyn. She spoke Russian at home. My father hated it. He thought speaking a language he could not understand was a form of disobedience. Maybe it was. Dominic smiled faintly. She believed every language gave you another life. Hannah touched the corner of the page. And which life is this, the one I did not choose? You chose it every day after the first. The room became quiet. Dominic looked at her without anger. That is the problem with you. What you do not allow the past to become an alibi. It explains people. It does not acquit them. He closed the sketchbook. Teach me to draw Russian. Their lessons began the following night. At first, they met in his office with grammar books spread across the desk. Dominic's vocabulary was strong, but his cases were inconsistent. He understood poetry better than business terms and remembered expressions his mother had used without knowing why they were correct. Hannah made him repeat difficult phrases. He disliked correction from everyone except her. You are changing the ending, she said one evening. I am improving it. You are avoiding the conditional tense. I dislike conditions, that is obvious. He leaned back in his chair. What did I say? You said I would have protected you. And what should I have said? I will protect you. Which do you prefer? Neither. His gaze settled on her. Why? Because I did not ask. The words remained between them. Dominic looked down at the page and repeated the sentence correctly. During another lesson, Hannah taught him the difference between wanting someone and needing them. In English, people confuse the two, she said. They confuse them in every language. Wanting gives the other person a choice, and needing turns their absence into an injury. Dominic watched her. Which one is more honest? Wanting. Which one is stronger need? He looked toward the dark window. That is what I thought. The lessons became the only part of Hannah's work that felt separate from the organization. For 1 hour, Dominic was not issuing orders or measuring loyalty. He was a man trying to remember the voice of his mother. For 1 hour, Hannah was not translating threats. She was correcting pronunciation. It was easier to ignore what he was when he allowed her to see what he might have been. That ease became its own danger. The line between them broke at a warehouse near the river. Walter Nash had worked for Kane Freight for 11 years. He was a quiet accountant with thinning hair and a habit of carrying 2 pens in his shirt pocket. Hannah had seen him many times but had never spoken to him for more than a minute. That night he stood in the center of the warehouse with his hands trembling. Travis placed bank records on a crate. $80,000, he said. Moved through 4 accounts. Walter looked at Dominic. My daughter needed surgery. You stole from me, Dominic said. I borrowed it. You changed the records. I was going to repay it. When Walter swallowed. I do not know. Travis laughed once. His daughter is alive. He decided that meant the debt disappeared. Walter's face folded. She is 16. Dominic remained still. Around them, several men waited. 2 of the enforcers spoke Russian and little English. Travis looked at Dominic. If he walks out, everyone learns the same lesson. Dominic's jaw tightened. He gave the order quietly. Take him downstairs. Make certain no one mistakes compassion for permission. Hannah felt the air leave her lungs. She knew what downstairs meant. Walter looked at her, though she had no authority to help him. One of the Russian-speaking men waited for her translation. Hannah heard Judith in the hospital telling her that desperation was not freedom. She heard Samuel asking what a translator owed the truth. She looked at Walter's wrist. A faded hospital band remained beneath his sleeve. Hannah translated. Release him. Give him 30 days. Garnish his wages until the debt is paid. No one touches his family. The enforcers looked toward Dominic. He said nothing. They took Walter toward the exit. Travis stepped forward. That is not what he said. The warehouse fell silent. Walter stopped near the door. Dominic turned to Hannah and spoke in Russian. Why did you change my order? Her pulse hammered against her throat. Because you left room for interpretation. I did not. Then fire me. Travis reached for her arm. Dominic stopped him with one look. Hannah stood her ground. You want him dead because you think fear is the only language these men understand. Dominic's voice remained low. You disobeyed me in front of my people. Yes. You made me appear weak. No, I gave you a way to be merciful without admitting you wanted one. No one moved. Dominic looked toward Walter. Then he addressed the warehouse. The translated order stands. Walter was taken outside. Travis stared at Dominic as though he no longer recognized him. This is a mistake. Dominic did not look at him. Leave. Travis walked away, but the expression on his face remained with Hannah. It was not anger, it was calculation. Later, Dominic drove Hannah home himself. Snow moved through the empty streets. The heater filled the car with dry warmth. Neither spoke until they stopped outside her apartment. You should not have done that, Dominic said. I know. Then why? Then why? Because he was going to die. He stole from me, for his daughter. You believe need excuses, Betrayal. Hannah looked at him. No. But I believe punishment should leave room for the person receiving it to remain alive. Dominic turned toward the windshield. You decide who deserves saving. No, you did tonight. Sometimes I only notice who everyone else has decided not to see. He looked at her then. The city lights reflected across the windows. Dominic raised one hand and touched her cheek. His fingers were warm. Hannah did not move. He leaned closer, then stopped. Tell me to leave. The request sounded careful, too careful. Hannah thought of the contract in her bag, Judith's treatment. Travis's hand on her wrist and the guards outside her building. Remove the car from my street. Dominic's hand fell. That is not safe. That was not my question. His eyes remained on hers. Then he took out his phone and made the call. The sedan across the street pulled away. Hannah watched it disappear. Only then did she turn back to him. She kissed him once. The kiss was quiet, restrained, and far more dangerous than anything that had happened in the warehouse. Dominic did not reach for her again. Hannah stepped out of the car. When she entered her apartment, Brooke was asleep. Across the city, Travis sat in a private room above a closed bar with two men Dominic considered allies. A folder lay open between them. Inside were account numbers, shipping routes, and copies of documents carrying Hannah Collins's name. One of the men asked Will the federal office believe she handled the translations. Travis poured himself a drink. They will believe a poor girl took money from a rich man. And Dominic, he will protect her. That could complicate things. Travis looked down at Hannah's forged signature. No, it will prove he has become exactly what I said. 3 nights later, Hannah returned home after midnight. Brooke was away visiting her parents. The apartment was silent. An envelope lay beneath the front door. There was no stamp and no address. Hannah carried it to the kitchen table and opened it. Inside were shipping manifests, customs declarations, and payment records. Her name appeared on every page. So did her signature. The Russian passages looked official at first. Then she read the second paragraph again. The vocabulary was correct. The grammar was not. Whoever had written the documents knew the language well enough to deceive an investigator, but not well enough to deceive her. Hannah read the documents until the kitchen clock moved past 2 in the morning. At first, the mistake seemed small. A noun placed in the wrong case, an English date written in a Russian sentence, a customs term translated word for word instead of by meaning. Then she saw the pattern. The errors were not random. Whoever created the files knew what official language looked like, but did not understand how a native speaker would arrange it. The writer had built Russian sentences with an English skeleton. Hannah spread the pages across the kitchen table. Her signature appeared at the bottom of 7 declarations. Each one connected her to cargo that had passed through Kane Freight during the previous 6 weeks. Electronics, jewelry, vehicle parts, medical equipment. The legal goods were mixed with entries that made no sense. A shipment marked as surgical instruments weighed nearly 4 tons. A container listed as antique furniture had been insured for less than the cost of shipping it. One payment record showed Hannah authorizing a transfer to a company in Latvia. She had never heard of the company. She had never signed the document. Yet the signature looked almost perfect. Someone had copied it from her contract. A sound came from the hallway. Hannah froze. The building settled around her. Pipes groaned behind the wall. A door closed 1 floor below. She reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered above Dominic's number. Calling him would be easy. A car would arrive. Men would search the building. Cameras would be checked. Doors would be watched. Hannah looked at the documents again. If someone inside Dominic's organization had created them, calling Dominic might warn the person responsible. She opened her laptop instead. For the next hour, she photographed every page and stored the images in 3 separate folders. She sent one copy to an email account she had created years earlier and rarely used. She saved another to a memory drive and pushed it beneath the loose floorboard under her bed. The original documents went inside a plastic bag. She hid them behind the frozen food in the back of the freezer. At 4:15, the black sedan arrived outside. Hannah had not requested it. She stood at the window and watched Michael step out of the driver's seat. He looked toward her apartment. She stepped back before he could see her. The car remained there until dawn. At the university the next morning, Hannah sat in the library with the forged documents displayed on her laptop. She enlarged the Russian text until individual letters filled the screen. One phrase bothered her more than the others. The writer had translated a customs expression as silent inspection. No native speaker would use those words together. Hannah had seen the same error before. 3 weeks earlier, Travis had sent a bilingual memo to the warehouse staff. Hannah had corrected the phrase and returned it to his assistant. She searched her email. The original memo was gone, so was the corrected version. Someone had deleted both from the company server. A chair moved across the floor behind her. Hannah shut the laptop. Dr. Samuel Carter placed a paper cup beside her. "You look like someone who has replaced sleep with caffeine and poor decisions. I have not had the caffeine yet. That explains why the decisions are still visible." He sat across from her. Hannah reached for the coffee but did not drink. Samuel looked at the closed laptop. "You missed seminar. I was working. Your work appears to involve customs law now." She said nothing. He folded his hands. "Hannah, I have spent 20 years listening to people avoid questions in several languages. You are not especially gifted at it. I thought I was improving. You are becoming more precise. That is not the same thing. She looked around the library. Students studied beneath green lamps. A printer hummed nearby. The ordinariness of the room made the documents in her bag feel even more dangerous. Samuel lowered his voice. Are you in trouble? I do not know. That answer usually means yes. Hannah opened the laptop again. She showed him one page. Samuel read the English version first, then the Russian. His expression changed. Where did this come from? It was left under my apartment door. Is this your signature? It looks like it. That was not my question. No. He read the Russian passage again. This was not written by a native speaker. I know. The errors are consistent. I know. Samuel glanced at her. You sound angry that I agree with you. I am angry that it is real. He leaned closer to the screen. This phrase is interesting. Silent inspection. It appears in federal shipping cases. Usually when someone is translating a phrase that means an inspection was avoided. Hannah looked at him. How do you know that Samuel sat back? For the first time since she had known him, he seemed uncertain about how much to say. Before I taught literature, I worked as a language analyst. For whom? The government. What part? The part that asked me not to discuss it later. Hannah closed the laptop halfway. You analyzed criminal cases, financial networks, shipping records, recorded conversations, anything where language could reveal who created a document. She watched him carefully. A bad translation can be accidental, he continued. Repeated mistakes in useful places are design. What kind of design? The kind that gives investigators an obvious suspect while protecting the person who built the transaction. Hannah felt cold despite the heat in the library. So the files are not only meant to frame me. No, they are meant to explain everything. If the authorities find enough documents with your name, they may stop looking for the person who created the operation. Hannah looked down at the signature. And if I am dead, Samuel did not answer immediately. That would make the documents harder to challenge. The printer stopped humming. The silence that followed felt too sharp. Samuel reached for the laptop. You need to take this to law enforcement. Which law enforcement? The federal authorities. Dominic has officers on his payroll, so do his rivals. You know that for certain. I know enough. Samuel studied her face. You are working for Dominic Kane. Hannah looked toward the window. She did not deny it. Samuel's voice remained calm. Does your mother know no? Does your friend know no? Does anyone outside his organization know where you go every night? You do now. That is not comforting. Hannah gathered the documents. Samuel stopped her. Do not investigate this alone. I am not alone. You work for the man whose company appears on the documents. He did not create them. You believe that? Yes. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. Belief is not evidence, no. And affection is not evidence either. Hannah's hand tightened around the bag. I did not say I loved him. You did not have to. She stood. Samuel lowered his voice. Send me something. Not everything. Enough that I can prove this conversation happened. I cannot put you in danger. You already did when you opened that laptop. Hannah left before he could say more. Dominic was waiting in her office when she arrived at Kane Freight. He stood beside the window with one hand in his coat pocket. You missed the morning meeting. I had class. You stopped answering your phone. It was on silent. You left your apartment without Michael. Hannah placed her bag on the desk. I took the train. Dominic looked at her. Why? Because people still do that. That is not an answer. She closed the office door. Neither is having a man outside my apartment all night without telling me. His expression did not change. Someone entered the building after midnight. Hannah's pulse tightened. Who? We do not know. Did you search my apartment? No. Did you want to? Yes. The honesty made her angrier. She pulled the forged documents from her bag and placed them on the desk. Dominic read the first page, then the second. His face became still. Where did you get these under my door? When? Last night. And you waited until now. I needed to know what they were. You needed to call me. I needed to think before your men removed every person in my building. Dominic picked up one of the manifests. This signature is yours. No, it looks like mine. He read the Russian text. What is wrong with it? Everything that matters. She showed him the repeated errors, the false customs language, and the payment records. Dominic listened without interrupting. When she finished, he called Travis. Lock every account connected to these shipments. Travis entered several minutes later. His gaze moved from Hannah to the documents. What happened? Dominic handed him a page. Someone used her identity. Travis read it. This could be real. Hannah looked at him. You think I signed it? I think people do surprising things when they need money. Dominic's eyes turned toward him. Travis continued. She had access to the contracts. She attended the meetings. She knew which companies were moving cargo. Hannah stepped closer. The Russian is wrong. You have made mistakes before, not these. Maybe you wanted the mistakes found. Dominic placed one hand on the desk. The sound was small. It silenced the room. Leave, he told Travis. Travis did not move. If she is compromised, we need to know. I said leave. Travis looked at Hannah with open contempt before walking out. Dominic waited until the door closed. You are moving tonight. No. Brooke will be taken to another apartment. No, your mother will be transferred to a private clinic. Hannah stared at him. You do not get to move everyone in my life like pieces on a board. Someone came to your home. Someone from your world. That is why I am handling it. That is why I do not trust you to. His jaw tightened. Dominic picked up his phone. Hannah placed her hand over it. Do not. He looked at her hand, then at her face. You are in danger. I know. You have no idea how much. Then tell me. I cannot, because I am not entitled to the answer, because the answer will not make you safer. She removed her hand. You keep saying safety as though it means the same thing as obedience. I am keeping you alive, and erasing my life while you do it. Dominic stood very still. I will not apologize for protecting you. You should apologize for needing me to be powerless before you can do it. The words landed between them. His eyes hardened, but there was pain beneath the anger. Go home, he said. I have work. Not today. Are you firing me? No. Then I am staying. Dominic moved closer. For a moment, Hannah thought he might touch her. He stopped. 2 guards, he said. You choose where they stand. No one enters my apartment. Agreed. No one speaks to Brooke. Agreed. My mother stays at her clinic unless she chooses otherwise. His hesitation lasted 1 second. Agreed. And I keep my phone. Yes. Hannah picked up the documents. That is protection. Dominic looked at her. No. That is negotiation. It is the only kind I will accept. That night, Hannah returned to the company archive. She searched old shipping reports for the incorrect phrase. It appeared 12 times. Every document had passed through Travis's office. Some carried Dominic's approval, but the attached notes had been prepared by Travis or his assistant. The records pointed toward 3 warehouses, 2 foreign accounts, and 1 company owned through a chain of shell corporations. Hannah copied the files. At 11:30, Travis left Kane Freight through the underground garage. Hannah followed him. She used a taxi for 6 blocks, then got out before the driver could enter the industrial district. Travis's car stopped outside an abandoned union office near the river. The windows were boarded except for one on the 2nd floor. Hannah crossed the street and entered the neighboring building through an unlocked service door. The stairwell smelled like rust and standing water. She climbed until she reached a broken window facing the union office. Voices drifted through the cold. Travis stood in a room across the alley with 2 men. One wore a dark suit and carried a federal identification case on his belt. The other spoke Russian with an accent Hannah recognized from the docks. She activated the recorder on her phone. The wind swallowed parts of the conversation. She heard enough. The accounts were already empty. A rival organization had received Dominic's roots. Federal investigators would find Hannah's name on shipping declarations. The man in the suit asked when she would be available for arrest. Travis poured himself a drink. She will not be. The Russian broker laughed. Dominic will not allow that. Dominic will try to save her, and then he runs or he dies. What about the girl? Travis looked toward the window. Hannah stepped back into shadow. Everyone will believe she wanted the money, he said. That part is even true. Her fingers went numb around the phone. The federal contact asked about the original documents. Already prepared, Travis said. Once she is gone, no one can challenge the translations. Hannah kept recording until the men left. Then she ran. She did not call Dominic. Instead, she went to the university. Samuel was still in his office, grading papers beneath a desk lamp. When he opened the door, Hannah placed the phone in his hand. "I need you to listen." He played the recording. His face lost color. "Do they know you were there?" "I do not think so. That is not enough. I need a way to send everything if I disappear." Samuel looked at her. "Hannah, can you help me?" "Yes." They created an automated message from an account unconnected to Kane Freight. Every 12 hours, Hannah would cancel the delivery. If she failed, the message would go to Samuel. The file contained the recording, the forged documents, account records, warehouse addresses, and a written statement. Samuel added the contact information for a federal prosecutor in Baltimore whom he trusted. Hannah read the statement twice before pressing save. "If this message has been delivered, I may be missing, detained, or dead." The sentence did not feel real. Samuel closed the laptop. "You need to leave Philadelphia tonight." "I cannot." "Your mother can go with you. Dominic will find us." "Is that what you are afraid of?" Hannah looked at him. "No." The answer surprised both of them. She left the university just before dawn. Judith was waiting in her apartment. Brooke stood beside the kitchen counter with red eyes. 2 guards waited in the hallway. Hannah stopped inside the doorway. "What happened?" Judith held up a hospital statement. The Kane Foundation appeared at the top of the page. "Your restaurant advanced your wages." Hannah closed the door. "Mom." How long? Brooke looked away. Judith's voice remained quiet. "How long has Dominic Kane been paying for my treatment?" Hannah removed her coat. "Since January, and you work for him?" "Yes." "Doing what translation?" "For a criminal organization." Hannah said nothing. Judith looked at the guards outside. "That is why those men are here. Someone is trying to hurt me. Because of him, because of the work." "That is the same answer." Hannah moved closer. "I chose this." Judith's expression broke. "What choices did you have? I could have said no." "And let me miss treatment?" "Yes. You call that a choice?" Hannah looked down. Judith touched her face. "I would rather lose time than watch you become someone else's property. I am not his property." "Then leave." The words entered the room and stayed there. Hannah could not answer. Judith saw it. Her hand fell. "You love him." "I do not know." "Yes, you do." Hannah's eyes burned. "That does not make him innocent." "No, it does not make me stupid." "No, it does not mean I can walk away and pretend none of this happened." Judith nodded slowly. "No, but do not call the cage freedom because you opened the door yourself." A phone rang in Hannah's pocket. The clinic name appeared on the screen. She answered. A woman said Judith's appointment had been moved to another building because of an equipment failure. Hannah looked at her mother. Judith shook her head. "No one called me." The line went dead. Hannah ran into the hallway. One guard lay near the stairwell unconscious. The second was gone. A man stepped from the elevator. Hannah recognized him from Kane Freight. He raised a cloth to her face. She turned, but another man seized her from behind. The hallway tilted. The last thing Hannah saw was Judith reaching for her. She woke in a dark office above a warehouse. Her wrists were bound to a metal chair. Travis sat across from her. A pistol rested on the desk between them. "You followed me," he said. Hannah tasted blood. "You left a bad translation under my door." His mouth tightened. "You always did mistake arrogance for intelligence." "No, I mistake repeated errors for a signature." He stood and moved toward the window. Below them, men carried weapons between stacks of crates. "You ruined him," Travis said. "Dominic? He built something that survived for 20 years. Then you arrived and taught him to ask permission." Hannah pulled against the restraints. "You sold his roots before you ever met me." Travis turned. She looked at his watch. "New, expensive. You stole from the accounts. You promised cargo to people Dominic refused to work with. I did not create your betrayal. You gave it a reason. No, I gave you an excuse." Travis crossed the room and struck the desk beside her. The gun jumped. Hannah did not flinch. "He let you change an order in front of his men. He let a father live. He let everyone see that he could be moved. And that frightened you. It made him weak. No, it made you less necessary." His face changed. Hannah knew she had found the wound. Travis picked up the pistol. "Federal agents will find your name on every record. They will find your body near the original manifests. Dominic will either run or come here. He will come, I know." The lights below went out. Travis looked toward the window. Gunfire cracked through the warehouse. Men shouted. A vehicle crashed through a loading door. Dominic had arrived. Travis grabbed Hannah by the arm and pulled her from the chair. The restraint tore skin from her wrist. Below them, muzzle flashes cut through the dark. Dominic moved between the crates with two loyal men. A Russian gunman slipped along the upper walkway behind him. Hannah heard the man speak into a radio. He was circling toward the loading bay. Dominic could not see him. Hannah twisted free enough to reach the railing. She shouted in Russian, "Behind you, upper left." Dominic turned. The gunman fired. The bullet struck the wall beside Dominic's head. Dominic fired once. The gunman fell from the walkway. Travis seized Hannah from behind and pressed the pistol beneath her jaw. Dominic climbed the stairs. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. "Let her go," Travis laughed. "You do not give orders anymore." Dominic raised his weapon. Travis pushed the barrel harder against Hannah's throat. "Put it down." Dominic lowered the gun to the floor. Hannah looked at him. For 1 second the warehouse became quiet. She spoke in Russian. "When I move, do not protect me." Travis tightened his grip. What did she say? Dominic did not answer. Hannah continued, "End this." She drove her heel into Travis's knee and dropped. The gun fired. Pain tore through her side. Dominic reached his weapon. 2 shots followed. Travis stumbled backward. Blood spread across his shirt. He looked at Dominic with disbelief. "She made you weak." Dominic crossed the distance between them. "No," he said. "She made weakness visible." Travis collapsed. Hannah pressed both hands against her side. Warm blood moved between her fingers. Dominic dropped beside her. His face changed when he saw the wound. "Hannah, I am awake. Stay that way. You always make requests sound like orders." His hands covered hers, pressing against the bleeding. Below them, sirens began to rise beyond the warehouse walls. Dominic lifted her into his arms. "Hospital," she whispered. "Not one I trust." The ceiling moved above her as he carried her down the stairs. Hannah opened her eyes once more. Blood covered the front of Dominic's shirt. "That is the problem," she said. "You only trust places you own." His jaw tightened. He carried her through the snow and into the waiting car. The sirens grew louder behind them. Dominic held pressure against her wound as the warehouse disappeared into the dark. The warehouse disappeared into the dark, but the sound of gunfire followed Hannah into unconsciousness. She woke beneath a white ceiling. A machine measured her heartbeat in soft electronic pulses. Her side burned beneath layers of bandages. The room smelled of antiseptic and cedar instead of the sour chemicals of a public hospital. For several seconds, she could not remember where she was. Then she saw Dominic sitting near the window. He was still wearing the shirt stained with her blood. The winter light had begun to rise behind him, turning the glass pale gray. His jacket lay across the back of a chair. A dried cut crossed his forehead. He looked like a man who had not moved since carrying her into the building. Hannah tried to sit up. Pain drove her back against the pillow. Dominic stood immediately. "Do not move." Her voice came out thin. "You still make concern sound like a threat." Something shifted in his face. He reached for a glass of water but stopped before touching her. "The bullet passed through your side. It missed your liver and spine. Where am I, a clinic? Which one I trust?" Hannah closed her eyes. Even half-conscious, she remembered what she had said in the car. "You own it. The building belongs to one of my companies. So, yes." He poured the water and placed it within reach. Hannah looked toward the closed door. Travis dead. The answer came without hesitation. She pictured him falling beside the desk, the surprise on his face, the blood spreading through his shirt. How many others Dominic did not answer? Hannah turned her head toward him. How many people died in the warehouse? 4 of Travis's men, 1 of mine. And the Russian gunman dead. Police know you took me from a shooting before the police arrived. I took you to a surgeon who would not waste time asking questions while you bled. You also removed evidence. Dominic's jaw tightened. I saved your life. Yes. The word stopped him. Hannah looked at the bandage beneath the hospital gown. You saved me. I am not denying that. Then rest. That does not erase how I got here. His eyes lowered. No. It was the first time he had agreed without defending himself. A doctor entered and checked Hannah's wound. She spoke carefully, avoiding any mention of police reports or admission records. Hannah noticed that the staff called Dominic Sir. No one asked for insurance. No one entered the room without his permission. When the doctor left, Hannah said, "You have done this before." Dominic remained near the window, helped someone who was shot, hidden someone who was shot. Yes. How many? He did not answer. Hannah turned away. The room was quiet except for the monitor. Dominic sat again, but he did not sleep. Judith arrived that afternoon. She entered with Michael beside her and stopped when she saw Hannah in the bed. For one moment, fear stripped years from her face. She crossed the room and held Hannah's hand. "What happened?" Hannah looked at Dominic. He rose. "I will give you privacy." Judith turned toward him. "No, you will stay." Dominic stopped at the door. Judith looked back at her daughter. "What happened?" Hannah told her enough. She described the forged documents, Travis, the warehouse, and the gunshot. She did not describe the barrel beneath her jaw or the moment she thought she would die. Judith listened without interrupting. When Hannah finished, her mother looked at Dominic. "You brought this into her life. I know." Judith seemed almost offended by the answer. "That is all you have to say, no. Then say the rest." Dominic stood with his hands at his sides. "She was targeted because of me. She was used because of me. I should have seen Travis before he reached her." "You think the failure was that you did not control the danger soon enough?" His face hardened slightly. Judith continued, "You do not understand that you were the danger." Hannah watched Dominic absorb the words. He did not argue. Judith returned her attention to Hannah. "You are coming with me," Dominic answered before Hannah could. "She cannot go home." Judith looked at him. "I was speaking to my daughter. There are people who still believe she has evidence. She does have evidence." Dominic's gaze moved toward Hannah. What evidence? Hannah said nothing. Judith saw the exchange. "You still do not trust each other." Dominic's voice remained quiet. "Trust is not the immediate problem." "No," Judith said. "Power is." Hannah spent 2 more days at the clinic. On the 3rd morning, Dominic moved her and Judith to a house in the Pocono Mountains. The property stood beyond a narrow road surrounded by pine trees. Snow covered the roof and softened the stone walls. A frozen lake stretched behind the house, pale beneath the winter sky. Inside, the rooms were warm. A fire burned in the main room. Food filled the kitchen. Clean clothes waited in every bedroom. 2 guards watched the front road. 2 more stood near the lake. Hannah's phone showed no signal. Her car keys were gone. She found Dominic in the study speaking to Michael. "Where are my keys?" Dominic ended the conversation. "Your car is still in Philadelphia, then give me another one." "No." The answer was immediate. Hannah closed the study door. "You said this was a safe house." "It is. It feels like a prison." "You are not a prisoner." "Can I leave not safely?" "That was not my question." Dominic looked toward the window. "There are men searching for you. There are always men searching for someone in your world. That does not make the threat less real." "No. It makes your solution easier to recognize." He stepped closer. "I watched you bleed in my arms. And now you think fear gives you the right to decide everything? I think keeping you alive matters more than whether you are angry with me. That is what every controlling man says when he wants obedience to sound noble." His expression changed. "You believe I am controlling you because I will not hand you a car and let you drive into an ambush. I believe you are controlling me because you never ask what I am willing to risk. You should not have to risk anything." "But I do." Hannah pressed one hand against her side. "My mother is here. Brooke has been moved. My university does not know where I am. Men stand outside every door. You call it protection because the word prison would force you to admit what you built." Dominic looked at the bandage beneath her sweater. "You were kidnapped because of me. No, I was kidnapped because men in your world believed I belonged to you." "You think there is a difference?" "Yes." The answer came quietly. "And the fact that you do not is why I cannot stay." For several seconds, neither moved. Then Dominic opened the study door. "You are not leaving tonight." Hannah laughed once without humor. "You finally said it honestly." The following days moved slowly. Snow continued to fall. Judith read near the fireplace and pretended not to watch Hannah struggle to sleep. Dominic spent hours on secure calls as his organization fractured across the city. Hannah heard pieces of the collapse through closed doors. A warehouse had been raided. 3 accounts were frozen. 2 supervisors had disappeared. A city inspector had begun cooperating with investigators. A rival group had taken control of one shipping route. Every report seemed to remove another part of the world Dominic once commanded. At night, Hannah woke with the sound of Travis's gun inside her head. Sometimes she felt the metal beneath her jaw. Sometimes she heard Russian voices in the dark warehouse. Sometimes she saw Dominic lowering his weapon because Travis had told him to. One afternoon, Hannah walked toward the lake alone. A branch cracked across the ice. She dropped before she understood why. Her hand struck the snow. Her breath vanished. The trees seemed to close around her. Someone approached from behind. Hannah turned and raised both arms over her head. Dominic stopped several feet away. He did not touch her. He lowered himself slowly into the snow. Hannah. She tried to answer, but her chest would not open. He remained where he was. Look at the house. Her eyes found the stone wall beyond him. Count the windows. She swallowed. 6. The trees beside the road. 3. The guards near the lake. 2. Her breathing began to return. Dominic sat in the snow until her hand stopped shaking. When she finally looked at him, his face was pale. "I can still hear the gun," she said. "I know." "No." Her voice cracked. "You know what guns sound like. You do not know what it felt like to become a reason someone pulled the trigger." Dominic looked down. "No," he said. "I do not." He offered his hand but did not move it closer. Hannah stood without taking it. Judith confronted him that evening. Hannah heard their voices from the hallway but remained outside the study. "You paid for my treatment," Judith said. "Yes." "You saved my daughter." "Yes, I am grateful for both." Dominic did not respond. "That does not make you a good man. I did not ask you to call me one." "No. You let gratitude ask for you." Silence followed. Judith continued. "You gave Hannah hope when she had none. Then you made yourself the price of keeping it. I never threatened to stop your treatment. You did not have to. You placed the money close enough to your approval that she could not see the difference. The medical fund was guaranteed. By you. Yes. That is the chain." Dominic's voice lowered. "What do you want me to do?" Judith answered without hesitation. "Make leaving possible." Hannah stepped away from the door before either of them knew she had been listening. That night, the dead man's switch activated. Hannah had missed the cancellation window while unconscious at the clinic. Samuel Carter received every file. He sent the evidence to Megan Rowe, a federal prosecutor in Baltimore who had no connection to the compromised Philadelphia task force. By morning, agents had entered Kane Freight 3 warehouses, 2 construction offices, and the home of the federal contact recorded with Travis. Dominic learned about the release from Eleanor Price. She arrived at the Mountain House in a dark coat carrying 2 locked cases. Hannah had met her only once at a charity dinner. Eleanor had spent the evening speaking to judges, donors, and politicians, as though every conversation had already been negotiated. Now she placed photographs across the dining table. One showed a deputy mayor entering a Kane warehouse after midnight. Another showed a federal agent receiving a package from Travis. Several pages contained account transfers tied to overseas officials. Eleanor looked at Dominic. "Your organization was being used by people above Travis." Dominic studied the documents. "For what? Off-record shipments, political money, evidence that needed to disappear. They used my roots. You sold access to corrupt men and seemed surprised they invited more corrupt men." Dominic ignored the insult. "What do they want now? You dead before you testify." Hannah stood near the window, and Eleanor looked at her. Discredited, arrested, or unavailable. Judith's face tightened. Eleanor opened the second case. "There is an offer." Dominic did not sit. "No, you have not heard it. I know what cooperation means. It means you surrender illegal assets, identify the officials who used your network, disclose overseas accounts, and dismantle the criminal side of Kane Freight. And in exchange, legitimate employees are protected where possible. Medical funds are audited. Hannah receives immunity if she provides complete testimony. Your cooperation is considered at sentencing." Dominic looked toward Hannah. "You gave them everything. I gave Samuel what I needed to survive. You could have told me. You would have stopped it." He did not answer. That is why I did not tell you. Dominic turned toward Eleanor. How much time? Hours. Perhaps less. He walked into the study and closed the door. No one followed. An hour later, Dominic returned carrying a folder. He placed it in front of Judith. These documents transfer the medical fund to an independent hospital board. Judith opened the folder. Dominic looked at Hannah. The money has been separated from every illegal account. Neither you nor I can control it. Your employment contract is canceled. The guards outside Brooks' apartment have been removed. Michael will return your phone and arrange any transportation you request. Hannah read the signed pages. What do you want? Nothing. She waited. Dominic's voice softened. That is what you asked me to learn. Before Hannah could answer, a guard entered through the rear door. Vehicles on the north road. Dominic looked toward Eleanor. Federal. She checked her phone. No authorized team is near this property. The first shot shattered a window. Judith dropped behind the dining table. Dominic pulled Hannah toward the stone wall as glass fell across the floor. More shots struck the front of the house. The guards returned fire. Eleanor opened a hidden panel beside the fireplace, revealing a narrow passage. There is a service tunnel to the lake. Dominic handed Judith to Michael. Take them out. Hannah refused to move. I am not leaving you. This is not a discussion. It never is. Another window broke. Dominic looked at her, anger and fear colliding in his face. Hannah turned to Judith. Go with Michael. Judith caught her hand. Hannah, I will be behind you. Judith knew she was lying. Michael pulled her into the tunnel. Eleanor followed. Dominic and Hannah moved through the kitchen as smoke entered the main room. Men approached from both sides of the house. Dominic fired through the broken window, then led Hannah toward a rear stairwell. They reached the service tunnel and ran beneath the house. Pain tore through Hannah's side with every step. At the far end, they emerged near the frozen lake. A black vehicle waited behind the tree line. Dominic helped Hannah inside and drove toward the road while gunfire echoed behind them. The house burned through the trees. Hannah looked back at the flames. The evidence is already beyond us. Dominic kept his eyes on the road. What Samuel sent it. The prosecutor has copies. Eleanor has copies. Even if we disappear, the truth does not. Dominic gripped the steering wheel. For years he had survived by controlling information, loyalty money, and fear. Now the truth existed in places he could not reach. He looked at the burning house in the mirror. Then there is nowhere left to run. There never was. They drove back toward Philadelphia. Dominic did not ask where Hannah wanted to go. She already knew. The Laurel Room stood dark behind its brass doors. Snow had begun to fall when Dominic parked across the street. He entered through the service entrance using an old key. Hannah followed him into the silent dining room. The tables were covered in white cloths. Chairs rested upside down. Only the streetlight reached the corner where they had met. Dominic removed his pistol. He placed it on table 12, in the same place where $5,000 had once rested beneath a whiskey glass. Federal vehicles appeared outside. Blue lights moved across the windows. Agents surrounded the building. Dominic stood beside the table. Tell them I am coming out. He spoke in Russian. Hannah looked at him. Tell them yourself. His eyes held hers. Then he turned toward the door. His Russian was imperfect but clear enough to carry through the glass. I am unarmed. I am surrendering. Before he opened the door, he looked back. Was any of it real? Hannah felt the question settle into every place he had wounded and every place he had reached. Yes. His face changed. She continued. That is why it has to end this way. Dominic stepped into the snow with his hands raised. Agents forced him to his knees. Hannah remained behind the restaurant window. Their eyes met through the glass. For the first time since he had entered her life, Dominic could not command her pay, her follow her, or protect her. He could only accept what she chose to do. The agents pulled his arms behind his back and locked steel around his wrists. Snow gathered on the shoulders of his coat as they forced him toward an unmarked vehicle. He did not resist. He did not look at the guns surrounding him. His eyes remained on Hannah through the restaurant window until an agent pushed his head beneath the doorframe. Then he disappeared. Hannah stood alone beside table 12. The pistol remained where Dominic had placed it. $5,000 had once rested on that same wood. At the time, the money had seemed large enough to change a life. Now, federal vehicles filled the street. A crime empire was collapsing across the city, and the man who had placed the cash in front of her was being taken away in handcuffs. An agent entered through the front door. Ms. Collins Hannah turned. "Yes, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them." She looked down. Her hands were already visible. They were trembling. The agent approached, slowly moved Dominic's weapon away from her, and asked whether she needed medical attention. "My mother. She is safe. Where with Ms. Price and federal personnel?" Hannah exhaled, but the relief did not reach the rest of her body. Another agent entered carrying evidence bags. They photographed the corner table, the pistol, the restaurant doors, and the wet footprints Dominic had left across the floor. One of them asked Hannah to sit. She chose a chair far from table 12. For the next 6 hours, she answered questions beneath the yellow light of the Laurel Room. When had Dominic first approached her? What did he offer? How much had he paid? Which meetings had she attended? Which crimes had she witnessed? Which orders had she translated? Had she ever knowingly altered a document? Had she ever knowingly concealed evidence? Had she warned Dominic about an investigation? Had she helped him avoid arrest? The questions came in different forms, but many asked the same thing. When did desperation stop being an explanation and become a decision Hannah answered as carefully as she could? She described the wager. She described the contract. She described Walter Nash and the order she had changed. She described the forged documents and the recording. She described the clinic, the safe house, and the moment Dominic placed his gun on the table. She did not describe him as a monster. She did not describe him as a savior. Whenever the agents tried to force the story into one shape, Hannah gave them the part that did not fit. By sunrise, the snow outside had turned gray. A federal prosecutor named Megan Rowe entered the restaurant carrying a paper cup of coffee and a file thick enough to hold several lives. She sat across from Hannah. "I need to explain where you stand." Hannah looked at the file. "Am I under arrest?" "Not tonight. That is not the same as no. No, it is not." Megan opened the file. "You accepted money from Dominic Kane. You attended meetings connected to criminal activity. You translated communications that helped his organization operate. You concealed information from law enforcement. I also gave Samuel the evidence." "You did, and Dominic surrendered." "He did." Hannah looked through the window at the empty street. "What happens to me?" "That depends on whether your cooperation is complete." Hannah turned back. "It will be." Megan studied her. "You should understand something before you promise that. Complete cooperation means you do not protect Dominic Kane from facts you find painful. It means you do not change an answer because you believe a good act should balance a violent one. I know. It means the government may use your testimony to send him to prison for the rest of his life." Hannah's throat tightened. "I know." Megan closed the file. "Do you?" Hannah pictured Dominic standing beside the door asking whether any of it had been real. "Yes." Megan gave her a written agreement. Hannah would receive conditional immunity for conduct connected to her translation work. If she disclosed everything surrendered, all records returned payments that could not be proven legitimate, and testified truthfully before a grand jury and at trial. The agreement did not call her innocent. It called her useful. She signed anyway. Judith was waiting at a secure federal building when Hannah arrived. Her mother crossed the room and wrapped both arms around her. Hannah held on too tightly. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Judith touched the bandage beneath Hannah's coat. "You should be in bed. I have spent enough time in rooms where other people decide when I can leave." Judith's eyes filled, but she smiled. "That sounds like my daughter." Brooke sat near the wall with a blanket around her shoulders. When Hannah looked at her, Brooke stood. "You lied to me. I know. You disappeared. I know. There were armed men outside my parents' house. I am sorry." Brooke crossed the room and hugged her. "You are not forgiven yet, I know, but you are alive." "Yes." Brooke pulled back and looked at her face. "Then we can argue properly later." The investigation expanded through the spring. Kane freight offices were sealed. Construction projects were suspended. Bank accounts were frozen. Men who had once refused to speak without Dominic's permission began making agreements with prosecutors. After that, I told myself I could reduce the harm from inside. A professor across the table asked, "Did you sometimes?" Was that enough? No. She returned every dollar she could not connect to documented translation work. The apartment became quieter after the accounts were frozen. The new clothes disappeared into evidence bags. The private car stopped arriving. The hospital foundation was audited. For the first time in months, Hannah took the train again. She had once thought ordinary life would feel like freedom. Instead, it felt exposed. Every stranger looked too long. Every dark vehicle made her heart race. Every sudden sound returned her to the warehouse. At night she woke with her hand pressed against the scar in her side. Judith found a trauma therapist who did not ask Hannah to forgive herself before she was ready. The therapist asked her to describe the moment before fear became panic. Hannah talked about the branch breaking across the lake. She talked about Travis's gun. She talked about Dominic lowering his weapon. She did not talk about love until the 7th session. What did you love about him, the therapist asked. Hannah stared at the floor. The person he could have been. Was that person real? Yes. Was he the only person who was real? No. The answer hurt more than she expected. Dominic was indicted in federal court in late May. The charges filled several pages. Conspiracy, money laundering, smuggling, bribery, obstruction, witness intimidation, racketeering activity, illegal possession of weapons, financial crimes tied to public contracts. His cooperation led to additional arrests, including 2 port officials, a federal agent, a deputy mayor, and several overseas partners. Eleanor negotiated with prosecutors for months. Dominic surrendered account numbers, property records, names, dates, and routes. He did not attempt to hide Travis's crimes behind Travis's death. He identified his own orders. When investigators asked which acts had been authorized by him, he answered without blaming the men who carried them out. The trial began in October. The courthouse steps were crowded before sunrise. Hannah entered through a side door with Megan Rowe. Inside the courtroom smelled of old wood paper and rain carried in on winter coats. Dominic sat beside his attorneys. He wore a dark suit without a tie. His hair was shorter. He looked thinner. The months in custody had removed the distance that money and security once created around him. When Hannah entered, he did not smile. He only stood with everyone else when the judge arrived. Hannah waited outside until the clerk called her name. She walked to the witness stand and raised her right hand. The oath felt heavier than any contract Dominic had placed before her. Megan began with simple questions: her name, her education, her work at the Laurel Room, her fluency in Russian. Then she asked about the night Dominic offered her $5,000. Hannah described the money beneath the whiskey glass. Why did you accept it? My mother needed treatment. Did Mr. Kane know that? Not when he made the wager. When did he learn before he offered me the job? Did he investigate your family? Yes. Did that influence your decision to work for him? Yes. How he offered to pay for my mother's treatment. Megan paused. Did you believe you were free to refuse? Hannah looked toward the jury. Legally, yes, and in practice, my mother would have missed treatment. Megan allowed the silence to remain. She moved through the meetings, the contracts, the warehouse, and the forged documents. Hannah described the order to take Walter Nash downstairs. What did you understand that order to mean? That he would be beaten or killed? What did you translate? I told the men to release him and recover the money through his wages. Did Mr. Kane authorize you to change the order? Now, what happened afterward? He allowed my translation to stand. Was that an act of mercy? Yes. Did it make the organization lawful? No. Megan approached the witness stand. Was Dominic Kane kind to you? Hannah felt the courtroom shift. Yes. Did he pay for your mother's care? Yes. Did he save your life? Yes. Did he also control where you went, who watched your home, and whether you could leave the safe house? Yes. Did his kindness erase those acts? No. Did those acts make every kind thing false? Hannah looked at Dominic. He was watching her without asking for anything. No. Megan returned to her table. No further questions. Dominic's attorney rose. His name was Charles Benton. He had a soft voice and the controlled patience of a man who preferred witnesses to damage themselves. Ms. Collins, you are an educated woman. Yes. You read the employment contract before signing it? Yes. You changed several terms? Yes. You understood Mr. Kane was not an ordinary businessman. I understood he was dangerous. And yet you accepted his money? Yes. You continued working after the first suspicious meeting? Yes. You continued after witnessing violence? Yes. You entered a romantic relationship with him? Hannah paused. Yes. You concealed that relationship from your mother, your friend, and your university. Yes. Charles moved closer. You also warned Mr. Kane about the betrayal inside his organization. I warned him that Travis was framing me. You knew that information would help Mr. Kane protect himself. Yes, you created a system that sent evidence only if you failed to cancel it. Yes. So while you claim fear, you remained in control of whether the evidence reached the authorities. Until I was shot. A few jurors looked toward her scar. Charles changed direction. Ms. Collins, is it fair to say that when working for Mr. Kane benefited you, you stayed, and when the organization collapsed, you protected yourself? Hannah felt the accusation move through the room. Part of it was true. That made it dangerous. I protected myself before the organization collapsed. But you stayed. Yes. Because you loved him, yes. Because you wanted the money at first. Because you enjoyed his protection sometimes. Charles allowed himself a small pause. Then why should this jury trust your testimony? Hannah looked toward Dominic. She remembered him drawing the bridge. She remembered his hand stopping before the first kiss. She remembered him ordering guards to follow her. She remembered his blood on her hands. Because loving someone does not require lying about what they did. The courtroom became still. Charles looked down at his notes. You blame Mr. Kane for your choices. No. You have described yourself as trapped. I was. Yet you also claim responsibility. Yes. How can both be true? Hannah answered quietly. A person can be pressured and still make choices. Being desperate explains why I entered. It does not erase every decision I made after. Charles studied her. No further questions. Walter Nash testified 2 days later. He described stealing the money, the warehouse, and the order that Hannah changed. His hand shook while he spoke. When asked whether Dominic had spared his life, Walter said yes. Then Abigail Nash took the stand. She was 17 now. She wore a navy dress and held herself with the rigid concentration of someone determined not to cry in public. Hannah had never met her. Abigail described the surgery her father had paid for with stolen money. She described waking in the hospital and finding him asleep beside her bed. She described what happened after the warehouse. My father came home alive, she said. But he put a chair beneath the front door every night. The prosecutor asked why. He thought someone would come back. Did anyone know? Did that end the fear? Abigail looked toward Dominic. No. She explained that the family moved twice. Walter stopped working. He woke at small noises. He kept the curtains closed during the day. Mr. Kane let my father live, Abigail said. I am grateful for that. She swallowed. But he also made us understand that living was something he believed he had the right to give. Hannah lowered her eyes. The warehouse had once felt like evidence that she changed Dominic. Abigail's testimony revealed the larger truth. Mercy from a powerful man did not erase the terror of knowing he could have chosen otherwise. Dominic changed his plea before the trial reached closing arguments. He admitted guilt to the central charges and accepted responsibility for the criminal enterprise. His attorneys prepared a statement describing his childhood, his violent father, his mother's death, and the organization he inherited. Dominic refused to read it. At sentencing, the courtroom filled beyond capacity. Judith sat beside Hannah. Brooke sat on her other side. Dominic stood before the judge. The judge asked whether he wished to speak. Yes. Dominic turned slightly not toward Hannah, but toward the victims seated behind the prosecution. I spent years believing that the good I did gave me the right to define the harm. His voice was steady. I paid hospital bills. I kept businesses open. I protected families who had nowhere else to go. Then I used those acts as evidence that the people I threatened did not matter. No one moved. I inherited part of this organization. I expanded the rest. My childhood explains what I learned. It does not explain why I continued after I knew better. He looked toward Walter and Abigail. What I did was not necessary. It was profitable. It gave me control. I called control responsibility because responsibility sounded honorable. Hannah felt Judith take her hand. Dominic continued. I am not asking the court to judge me by the people I helped. The people I harmed did not receive the benefit of that version of me. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison, followed by financial restrictions and supervised release. Illegal assets would be sold. Verified proceeds would fund restitution. Legitimate businesses would be placed under independent management or dissolved. Dominic accepted the sentence without visible reaction. When the officers approached, he turned toward Hannah. For a moment, the courtroom faded around them. He spoke in Russian. "Live a life I cannot control." Hannah felt tears rise but did not look away. That was always the point. The officers led him through a side door. This time, Hannah did not watch until he disappeared. 1 year later, the Laurel Room opened its doors again. The old photographs remained on the walls, but the darkest corner no longer belonged to powerful men. On Thursday nights, immigrant writers read poetry beneath the chandeliers. Students practiced translation at the bar. Musicians carried instruments through the same brass doors Dominic once entered beneath falling snow. An independent board owned the restaurant. Hannah held a small legal share based on verified unpaid consulting work and wages recovered through the court. Nothing in the building came from hidden accounts. Judith sat near the front window with a cup of tea. Her cancer was in cautious remission. She had begun growing her hair again and complained that everyone treated remission like permission to become sentimental. Brooke managed the event schedule when she was not teaching. She still reminded Hannah that forgiveness had conditions. Hannah returned to the university and completed her thesis. The title was printed in black letters across the first page. The Grammar of Choice Translation, Power and Moral Responsibility. Samuel read the final draft twice. When he returned it, he wrote only one sentence. "You finally stopped trying to make one truth cancel another." Hannah began working with the hospital to create ethical standards for medical interpreters. She also joined the board overseeing the treatment fund Dominic had released. The foundation carried no family name. A reporter once asked why they had removed Kane from the title. Hannah answered, "Patients should not have to thank a powerful stranger before receiving care." She visited Dominic 6 months after sentencing. The prison stood beyond several miles of bare winter fields. Guards searched her coat, examined her identification, and directed her into a room divided by thick glass. Dominic entered wearing a plain uniform. He looked older, not weaker, more visible. They lifted the black phones at the same time. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Dominic said, "Your Russian has become more formal. You have become easier to correct." A faint smile appeared. He told her he was teaching literacy classes. He translated letters for inmates whose families spoke little English. He had begun drawing again using pencils from the commissary. Hannah listened carefully. Part of her wanted to turn each act into proof that the man she loved had finally defeated the man she feared. She refused. "Do you come because you forgive me?" he asked. "No, because you owe me no." Then why Hannah rested her free hand against the glass? Because change is easier to perform when no one remembers who you were. Dominic looked at her hand. "And you intend to remember both men?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "That seems fair." Before the visit ended, he gave a guard a folded sheet of paper. The guard carried it to Hannah. It was a drawing of Philadelphia at sunrise. The river reflected pale light. The bridges rose through morning fog. In the foreground, the Laurel Room stood with its front door open. There were no guards, no black cars, no locked windows. Dominic had drawn a place for her without placing himself inside it. Hannah folded the paper carefully. She did not promise to return. She did not promise not to. On the anniversary of the $5,000 challenge, snow fell over Philadelphia. The Laurel Room had just closed after a Russian literature reading. A young waitress named Emily wiped table 12 while Hannah counted receipts at the bar. Emily looked toward the old corner. "Is this really where you met him?" "Yes." "Was he as frightening as people say?" Hannah closed the register. "More." Emily smiled nervously. "And you still answered him in Russian, yes?" Why Hannah walked toward the table. She remembered the hospital invoice inside her uniform pocket. She remembered Dominic placing the money beneath a glass. She remembered the men waiting for her to lower her eyes. "I needed the money." Emily waited. Hannah touched the edge of the table. The wood had been polished, but a faint mark remained where the whiskey glass once stood. And I was tired of being afraid. She turned off the final lamp. Outside, snow moved through the streetlights. Hannah locked the restaurant door and stepped into the city alone. Behind her table, 12 remained empty.